Mhm.
All right, so here we are. My name is Ayana Malone, and I'm the Director of Training and Education for Onyx Therapy Group. And I am here today with Ms. Desiree Brown, who is an educational consultant with Onyx Therapy Group. And so, beyond the fact that Desiree and I both work for Onyx and have worked together outside of Onyx in lots of places, we have a joint shared experience where both of our children actually have cerebral palsy. And so, as we talk and share our stories as parents, as Black parents with sons with disabilities that have to be addressed, physical disabilities, we always come back to this conclusion and this understanding that equity really evolves around Black children, Black people, healthcare, and ableism. And this idea of ableism is always left out of the conversations when you're talking about equity. We talk about race, we talk about socioeconomic status, we talk about xenophobia, the state of the world as it is right now, but oftentimes those with disabilities are left out of the conversation. So we wanted to bring a little bit of context into the conversation. The Onyx Therapy Group mission is really about healing. It's about awareness, empowerment, and advocacy. And so having these kinds of conversations really elevate the belief and the understanding around inclusiveness, inclusivity, even when you're having an equity conversation, that ableism is something everyone often overlooks. And as children who need specialized services, who maybe were in special education, are going to be in special education, having this conversation is important to us. So, Ms. Desiree, when we talk about ableism and we talk about equity, what are some thoughts that you can share with us about your own experiences, not only personally, but professionally?
Well, there are a couple of things that I think of immediately. Since we're talking about this during a pandemic, the first thing that rises to the top is what we didn't do as a country, individuals who were, whether that was in terms of the education component or whether it was work related. My son, as we discussed, is a young adult now. We're talking about what that means in terms of continuing education and how no one's having that conversation, how to make sure that we are able to any of the things. They're all having difficulty accessing. And historically speaking, I think about what our lives look like from the moment he was here. So, um, from his initial evaluation through early intervention and how that was couched in a different way, the color of his parents' skin, their approach was quite different. Um, Although it was 20 years ago, it is still, it still resonates with me, not only as a family member, but what I do professionally, ensuring that children are assessed exactly where they are and not just based on what they believe are environmental circumstances, their decision making and how they assess. The next level of work is around what we do professionally, which really is having difficulty in that time in supporting children with disabilities, implementing services and supports remotely
Mhm.
to do some things for my son today. Um, would he lag behind? I'm not quite sure. I believe that I would put forth a really good effort to ensure that he didn't fall behind, but I'm not a therapist. I'm not a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, nor am I in terms of being able to develop curriculum at home that would be able to best meet his needs. May not be in my wheelhouse. Would I try really hard? Absolutely. Would I
Mhm.
succeed? I don't quite know.
Mhm.
But we all know that this is a trying time in terms of being left behind, and then having the double issue of being a person of color, of being Black. Let's be honest about it. Being a Black man in an environment and having a Black mom who's pushing and a Black family who's really trying to make sure he gets his needs met. I see a significant gap in what's happening.
And I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront because when we talk about the reopening of schools, when we talk about hybrid models, distance learning, even in person, I think there's a lot of inherent equity that occurs, but the equity that's not being talked about are children who have specific needs, children who have specific challenges, who receive specific services through our school system, and how that is going to impact their progress overall. Lots of people are talking about academic progress, but as I have a 3-year-old who needs speech and language therapy, who needs physical therapy, who might need academic services. And that is just not happening. And it's
It's
not happening well during this time. And that's not being talked about. There's a lot of health concerns because a lot of students who have disabilities also have secondary health issues that will impact them if they contract COVID-19, or if they are even asymptomatic and bring it home to other members of their family. So what do you suggest parents with, children who may have disabilities or challenges think about, advocate for? How should they speak up so that their voices are heard by these school districts who are hearing a lot of other voices, but this idea of ableism is very foreign to them?
I think first and foremost, I would recommend every parent, no matter where you are academically, to be in tune with what your son's or daughter's IEP says. That way, you're clearly able to kind of get a picture as to what they need in the school setting. Depending on where you are and what you have access to. Talk about my beliefs in terms of what technology and other resources look like now during a pandemic. I would say ensuring that you are holding your school once you truly understand what the needs are. So IEPs are written in a way that most parents don't always quite understand, and the school system is required to make sure you understand exactly what it is. So no matter how hard you have to push, you should do that to get a clear understanding about what that means. The second part of that for me is, again, holding the school system accountable, but holding yourself accountable as well as at home. We're not educators. Well, that's not true. We are educators. However, not every family is. And you don't have a teacher residing in your home with you. So this means a number of other things. I would also highly recommend that they hold the school system, their feet to the fire in terms of providing those services that are best met in person. Whether you are pushing for compensatory services on the back end, or whether you're trying to be creative about what physical therapy looks like in a remote setting. They are required to do that for you. They should do it. And I'm quite certain that they're missing the mark. I know here this week, there was a lawsuit filed against the city for DC from the juvenile justice system in terms of people not getting their services met. So we know that it's a significant problem if lawsuits are now pending because people aren't getting their needs met, and these are our incarcerated youth. So imagine if our incarcerated youth aren't getting anything, what that really means at home. And then, I think about those comorbidities with our children. I have been terrified that something would happen to my son who does have cerebral palsy. What does COVID-19 look like for someone with CP? We don't know. No one knows. And so I'm doing everything above and beyond the call of duty to try to make sure that he's safe. And he's a young adult. He doesn't want his mom keeping him safe, but that's our reality in terms of that, because I don't know what that means later on. Does COVID-19 impact your neurological? Yeah, we don't know. But it's certainly something that we have to address. But again, back to what parents should do, hold people's feet to the fire. You're not an educator. Someone is required by law to provide those services and supports for you. Make sure that they do it for you. Be informed, be engaged, and push.
So I like the idea of being informed, being engaged, and pushing. And we have a little bit of a bias because both of us have worked in the school system, right? So we know who to call, we know when to call, we know exactly the language to use when we call. What would you suggest to a parent who really doesn't know, who doesn't know or understand
Mhm.
the special education law, or they don't know who the ombudsman is
Right,
because
right,
don't know that DC schools has an ombudsman as well as the mayor's office has an
right.
ombudsman that is specifically tasked to addressing that. How would you support parents or at least give them the right direction in terms of, look, you just said a whole lot in this
Yep,
webinar, and I
yep.
don't know what those words mean.
Mhm. So I think I have to harken back to my initial experience when our son was born. He has an older sibling, and nothing was going on. She, extremely brilliant, running track and field, very typically developing young lady. And then I didn't know what to do because I really didn't have anyone around me who had similar concerns with having someone who was 2 pounds and suddenly, they weren't quite walking and talking as they should, when they should, the same way that his sister did. The first thing that I did was connect it with other parents. And I know that sounds very cliche, but families are at the root of why the education system can be successful. They're at the root of why the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act exists. It wasn't a bunch of attorneys and politicians who got in a room and said, hey, we need to make sure the rights of these students are being met. It wasn't that. It was moms and dads who said, my kid has to go to school. You all should provide for them and we shouldn't have to institutionalize them. It's really the foundation of it. And I made my initial connection and foray into this field in terms of family advocacy and family engagement through other parents. I showed up at events. I showed up as city council members and said, hey, you know what? I saw this parent on the TV. Where's this parent at? And I would see that person in the room. I would introduce myself and I say, how did you get your son and daughter these things? Tell me what the process looked like. And it was very informal. Parents are savvy. Parents are super smart. And that was what ensured that, my family was successful. Even though I was already dibbling and dabbling in the education world already, this whole special education thing was something different. It was much bigger. Then the next step is figuring it out. DC has a nice little 311 number. Pick up the phone. I don't know what to do. They will send you to every single agency until you figure it out. It's okay. That's their job. The district government has the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, and they have a due process system there. Keep calling. They will direct you exactly where you need to go. And again, it's about processing information in a way that makes sense to you. Everything's written in legalese or it's written in a language that is not quite typical. We think in terms of family and they think in terms of law or they think in terms of policy and guidance, and things are written that way. Take your time, get to know what systems exist that support you and your family. And again, be informed. That is the saving grace for me, which was being informed. You have a little person back there who won't do what you want him to do. And, you know, yes.
These are the
And so,
realities of pandemic and
yes.
schools and daycares being closed.
Yes, that's a reality. But you're also trying to do all the other pieces as well. You're trying to be employed. You're trying to get information out there that others can be able to use to better their lives. And I'm going to tell you, having an educational advocate doesn't hurt at all. And it doesn't mean that you're preparing to sue the school system. This is about preparing to make sure that you are informed enough to do what's best for your son or your daughter. Um, my ask as a parent has always been that every system allows my son to be the best him. Not that he needs to be like his sibling or he needs to be like all the other students in the school system, but they should exhaust resources to ensure that he was his best self. And that's what I planned on doing as a mom as well.
So I'd love to take a moment to broaden the conversation We've been talking about the school and the school system, and what I want to broaden that into more of a societal view of ableism and equity as Black people. So, what I have found more often than not is for me to receive clear information from doctors, to receive um, understanding from his daycare, et cetera, has been really challenging. And I
Yes.
can't help but think about the connection between Black people, medical services, and not just Black people, but people of the global majority,
Right.
which are Black and brown
Black and
people.
brown people. Right.
And when you report something or you say something or you indicate there's pain, you indicate I'm not sure if this is correct, we don't get the response. We
No.
don't get the understanding. Oftentimes, our concerns are brushed aside. There is a specific belief that Black people do not suffer pain in the
Right.
same way,
Right.
that they do not suffer mental health challenges in the same way, that we're just this otherized people. And
Mm-hmm.
then, as an advocate for our children, we have to say, no, we think this, no, we think that. And we're often brushed aside. This
Mm-hmm.
happened, when my child was about to have surgery on his foot. And I was like, how are you recommending surgery? And you never did an x-ray. Like you're just telling me
Right.
we're gonna go in and, cut his Achilles tendon. Well, how do I know it's not the bone? Oh, well, ma'am, we know. And, through some,
No.
doctoral language. And I found that an incredible barrier. I am persistent and I am formally educated. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's that space of, oh, I'm not going to let you get away from that. But there are many of us as Black men and Black women, or Black and brown people who might not speak English as a first language,
Oh yeah.
who we just kind of defer to these experts. And these experts really see Black people as almost overly able, if that's
Mm-hmm.
a term, in that what we're describing is not that bad. Do you have thoughts around that?
Oh, I have plenty of thoughts around that. And trust me, um, it's been a combined effort from my family to ensure that of my son, that his voice is heard and his needs are met. And yes, there's this urban legend that exists that Black people and people of color, our pain threshold is different. Oh, you couldn't possibly be bleeding, bleeding, and perhaps you don't need to know exactly what we're doing to your family member. We're the experts and you're not. Um, and it's very frustrating as a family member to have to suddenly become a physician when that's not your area of expertise. But we are required. I required everyone on my team with my son to give it to me exactly the way I can process it. That went against everything that they knew. It's Black people need to just sit down and be quiet and take it. And I just couldn't because I wanted to be the best family member for my son. Um, but it echoes the sentiment across the country, to be honest. If I can really be forthcoming, this is where we are in terms of race, class, and culture in this country. And um, disability is a very small component of it. And if it's happening on the big scale, think about it 10 times worse on the disability scale. Um, and again, as a parent, it was very hard. I don't want to even leave this session here for anyone thinking that this was a very easy task for us as a family. It wasn't. I'm still learning something new every day. I'm still learning to be creative about what I do for my son. I'm still advocating for him when he goes to the physician as a young adult. His mom doesn't need to attend any appointment with him. He has his own health insurance. He still needs his parent around to say, that doesn't sound right. What do you mean by this? I'm going to need you to break this term down for me really quickly so that we can understand, and never give up. Um, I don't want to be the Black lady that always says never give up to other Black people, but really we can't. you have to be relentless, and it's exhausting, but you cannot let them do something you wouldn't want to happen to your son or daughter. And you can't go into anything uninformed. The same way you're saying, oh, you know, doesn't he need an X-ray? And why wouldn't he need an X-ray, or at least an MRI or a CAT scan or something? Help me understand exactly what should be happening with them. And perhaps once they give you the information, you can say, oh, okay, I get it. Maybe that isn't a requirement. Or you can turn around and say, nah, I'm not comfortable with that. One of the things that I was known for, and you knowing me, I'll take my money someplace else in a heartbeat. Money, even though my complexion may not matter, my money did. My talk with, you know what, perhaps there's another physician out there that will talk to me. And you have a right as an individual to change. You have a right to a second and a third or a fifth opinion, as long as you want to get it to ensure that you understand what's happening. You have a right to do that, and money talks. And you have a right to, as a mom, as a dad, as a sibling who may be caring for someone who has a disability, to get what you need for your family member. And you have a right to push. And it doesn't feel good. I don't want anyone to think that, oh, find some doctor that you loved for the last 2 years, you have to change. That doesn't feel good. But what does feel good is making sure you get the right thing for your son or daughter. This system literally has not been set up for our betterment. It is our job to ensure the system works for us, because it wasn't built for us.
I think I want to tag into what you were saying about ensuring that, parents or caregivers feel empowered to know that they can go elsewhere. One of the things that I think intersects with ableism and equity is, the idea of health insurance, or more often Medicaid, right? And so many families out there of the global majority might be accessing Medicaid, CHIP, et cetera, and feel like their hands are really tied in terms of what doctors they can go to, in terms of what they have access to. And more often than not, healthcare organizations are prejudicial and biased against people with Medicaid or with government assistance, and take advantage. Exactly, and take advantage. So I want to echo your sentiment of, whether you are on Medicaid, whether you have CHIP, your child has CHIP, whatever, it does not matter. You can still make different choices, and you can still say exactly what Ms. Brown said. I can take my Medicaid card elsewhere. What's interesting is that many institutions actually rely heavily on Medicaid because they get more money from the government than they do from private insurance. So they want your Medicaid dollars. So, I just want to put that out there. They want your Medicaid dollars.
Fabulous point. That's a fabulous point. And that money is not only you get more, but it's more assured. You don't have a whole lot of people on the back end saying, was that an approved service beforehand? Or, denying your claim. All of that. Medicaid operates differently, and Medicaid can be empowering as well. One of the things that I'd love to double down on is that when you are choosing your Medicaid provider, no matter what state you are in, be informed about what that provider does for the disability community as well. Talk to other parents if you have an opportunity to do that. Hey, were you able to get medication easily? What physicians are doing a great job. And you don't have to take disrespect or discontent for you. You don't have to stay. It really is okay to walk away from all of that and choose someone that works for you. Just because someone is the leading expert in their field doesn't mean that they're the best person for you and your family, and you can take your Medicaid elsewhere.
Right. That's a great point. As we begin to wrap up, I want to, circle back around to this idea of ableism, and when we are having conversations about equity, how disability is often left out of the conversation. Are there other thoughts or, observations that you have made as an education expert, as an education advocate, having worked in DC government, having worked DC school systems, charter schools, and through personal experience that you would like to share?
Absolutely. One of the things that I hinted at a little bit earlier in our conversation was about my thoughts in terms of what this global pandemic did to us around equity in education. The first is that my last day in a school building was March 13th, 2020. And I walked away from that building knowing that the people in my home would have access to anything that they needed, whether it was food, whether it was utilities. I walked away with that. But most importantly, I am a grandmother, and my granddaughter did not miss a beat. She didn't have to worry about, am I going to get a Chromebook? What do we have internet service? All of those things. It didn't even matter. We have plenty, and she would have plenty. What resonated most with me was that when I walked away, I didn't have that worry, but quite a few families in this area had that worry. They didn't know how to use a Chromebook if the school gave them one, which meant that their son or daughter wouldn't receive education. They wouldn't have access to the curriculum, and it knocked a whole lot of Black and brown children out of the education arena. They just didn't have a chance at it. To this day, there are a number of students who missed the entire remainder of the school year as a result of access. And so even when those families did have access, or the school issued a Chromebook, they were not trained to use that equipment. And then we're talking about training an individual who may have an intellectual disability on how to log into a classroom. And so to me, when we talk about access to technology and access to the internet, before it seemed like a privilege, when it really was a requirement for us to continue our lives. It was a requirement for me to keep educating my granddaughter, a requirement for my son to get his federal government clearance. It was a requirement for me to be able to continue to work to provide an income for my family. And then I kept saying, there are a number of kids out there who can't even turn on their computer. So certainly they're not getting special instruction. Certainly they're not getting physical therapy. Certainly they're not getting any clinical services. Certainly they're not getting occupational therapy, and they didn't. And so now as we are listening to schools reopening, and you listen to the radio and you see the commercials and they're saying, don't forget to call your school to get your computer, or some of the charters are really touting what they're able to provide people so that you can enroll in their school. That's great, but that's not enough. The secondary conversation as a parent of a child with a disability is, great, you're going to give me my computer, but what does that come with? Are you helping me when someone who cannot type into a Google Classroom? What does that mean for me? What does special instruction look like for me and my family? Is my kid going to be pulled out and just kept in a Google Classroom all day by herself or himself? How do we ensure that inclusion happens on this platform? There's a lot that needs to be done today. We scrambled, and I get it. No one prepared for this. No one in the country was prepared for this, and we're still scrambling to make that happen. I still think we need to do a lot more work on that. And parents will lead the way. I assure you, parents will make a difference in this. If we are a unified front, a cadre of families and educators and advocates will make a difference.
I agree. And one of our missions at Onyx Therapy Group, like I mentioned at the top of this conversation, was really around empowerment, bringing awareness to certain topics and then empowering the global majority, Black and brown people, to make different decisions. And so, we think of Onyx Therapy Group as just direct clinical services, and really it's so much more. It includes, education, it includes advocacy with advocates like yourself. It includes, bringing thoughts, bringing perspectives to our community that perhaps other people haven't thought about, other people haven't considered. and giving them tools to do something different with their lives. So both of us work at Onyx Therapy Group. You can find us online, www.onyxtherapygroup.com, where you can see our pictures, where you can learn a little bit more about what we do. And if you have questions, if you have ideas, I see my son has gotten the
step stool.
the step stool. It is now in the sink. And you know, if you're wondering about, I'm just going to turn that, the challenges of being at home with your children, being at home with your children while you are working, while you are trying to get things done, I encourage you to take a look at our YouTube page, where I did a talk around learning labs, learning pods in community labs. There's a long one that's about 45 minutes long, but then there's also just a 5-minute quick bite if you want the quick and dirty, and we can support you in those ways as well. So thank you for the conversation today. These are talks that we've had together, Desiree, often, and it's just like, I was like, you know, we shouldn't be talking about this in a vacuum. We should be talking about this because there are other Black moms, there are other Black dads, there are other brown people, Latinx, Asian American, Indian, African, Caribbean people who are wondering what they're doing, wondering how they can do it well. And so bringing that message is really important.
So I hope that we get an opportunity to do this again. And I'm hoping that as the audience views these, they throw out ideas as well about what would benefit them. We can create a bunch of information and platforms for them to have information, but not until they tell us what we want, what they need. We're not, you know, we can respond. Hoping that we can continue to do this, continue to have dialogue, and I'm hoping that we can continue to also have conversations about what it means to have a work-life balance while you're having school and work in the same time.
Right, exactly. All right, so thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.